The moment between what happens to you and what you do next is the most powerful moment of your entire life. Most people don't even know it exists. They just react instantly, automatically, like puppets on strings they can't even see. Today I want to talk to you about something that separates the people who control their lives from the people whose lives control them. The pause. That tiny gap between stimulus and response where everything gets decided. Here's the truth that changed my understanding of human behavior forever. Your reactions are running your life. And until you learn to interrupt them, you'll never be free. This changes everything. Years ago, I destroyed a relationship in 30 seconds. Someone I cared about said something that triggered me, and I fired back instantly. Words I couldn't take back, damage I couldn't undo. All because I reacted instead of responded. Lying awake that night, I kept replaying it. What if I'd paused? What if I'd taken just 5 seconds before opening my mouth? Everything would have been different. That moment taught me something I wish I'd learned decades earlier. The quality of your life is determined by the quality of your responses, not your circumstances, not what happens to you, how you respond to what happens to you. Here's what I've observed after years of studying human behavior. The most successful, most respected, most emotionally intelligent people all share one trait. They think before they react. They've mastered that tiny gap between trigger and response. Most people are slaves to their impulses. Their emotions hijack them. Their reactions own them. But the masters, they've learned to pause, to breathe, to choose. Let me show you how to reclaim the most powerful moment of your life and why everything changes when you do. Let me ask you something that might be uncomfortable. How many times this week did you react to something and immediately regret it? Maybe you snapped at someone who didn't deserve it. Maybe you fired off an angry email you wish you could unsend. Maybe you said something in the heat of the moment that damaged a relationship. Maybe you made a decision based on emotion that you're now paying for. If you're being honest, it probably happened more than once, maybe more than you can count. And here's the thing, you're not alone. This is the human condition. We're reaction machines. Something happens, we respond instantly, and then we deal with the consequences over and over and over again. Some of you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. You've watched yourself do things you knew were wrong while you were doing them. Like there's a part of you screaming, stop, but another part just barrels ahead anyway. That disconnect between knowing better and doing better is the gap where most of life's problems lie. I know how this feels because I've lived it more times than I care to admit. I've sent messages I should have deleted. I've said things I should have swallowed. I've made decisions in moments of anger or fear that took months or years to recover from. And every single time the problem wasn't the situation. The problem was my reaction to the situation. Here's what happens when you live reactively. You become a prisoner of your circumstances. Your mood depends on what happens to you. Your behavior depends on how others treat you. Your entire life becomes a series of responses to external events you can't control. Think about what this means. You wake up feeling good, then someone cuts you off in traffic and now you're angry. You were having a productive day, then you get a frustrating email and now you're distracted. You were feeling confident, then someone criticizes you and now you're spiraling. Every external event pulls you in a different direction. You're not steering your life, you're just bouncing off whatever happens to you. And the worst part, most people don't even realize this is happening. The reaction is so fast, so automatic that they think it's just who they are. I'm just an emotional person. I have a temper. That's just how I respond to disrespect. No, those aren't personality traits. Those are untrained responses, habits you've never questioned, patterns you've never interrupted. Let me tell you what this costs you over a lifetime. First, it costs you relationships. The people who love you get the worst of your reactions. They're the ones who see you when you're triggered, when you're stressed, when you're not in control. And over time, those reactions accumulate. They erode trust, they create distance, they damage bonds that took years to build. Second, it costs you opportunities. Reactive people make poor decisions. They quit jobs in moments of frustration. They end relationships in moments of anger. They make financial decisions based on fear. And years later, they look back and wonder how their life got so far off track. Third, it costs you health. Living reactively means living in constant stress response. Your nervous system stays activated. Cortisol floods your body. Your blood pressure rises. Your sleep suffers. Your immune system weakens. Reactive living is literally killing you slowly. Fourth, it costs you respect. People don't respect reactive individuals. They might fear them. They might avoid them. But they don't respect them. because reactivity signals a lack of control, and nobody trusts someone who can't control themselves. I've watched brilliant people destroy their careers because they couldn't manage their reactions. I've watched loving couples tear each other apart because neither could pause before responding. I've watched talented individuals sabotage every opportunity because their emotions ran the show. The stakes are higher than most people realize. Your reactions aren't just momentary lapses, they're shaping your entire life every single day. Now, I want to challenge something fundamental about how you see yourself. You've probably believed your whole life that your reactions are automatic, involuntary, that when something happens, your response just happens like a reflex. This is the lie that keeps people stuck. Here's the truth that transformed my understanding of human behavior. Between every stimulus and every response, there is a space, a gap, a moment of choice. It might be tiny milliseconds sometimes, but it's there. And in that space, you have the power to choose your response. This isn't philosophy. This is neuroscience. When something triggers you, your amygdala, the emotional center of your brain, fires first. It's fast, automatic, designed to protect you from threats. But here's the thing. That initial firing doesn't have to determine your behavior. Your prefrontal cortex, the rational decision-making part of your brain, can intervene, can override, can choose a different response. The problem is that most people never give their prefrontal cortex a chance. They react so fast that the rational brain never gets involved. The emotional brain runs the show completely. But when you pause, even for a few seconds, you give your rational brain time to come online, time to assess, time to choose. This is the difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is automatic, unconscious, driven by emotion and habit. Responding is chosen, conscious, driven by intention and wisdom. Let me give you an example. I was working with a man who had serious anger issues. His marriage was falling apart because every time his wife said something that triggered him, he'd explode, yelling, saying cruel things, sometimes throwing objects. He hated this about himself. He'd apologize afterward, promise to change, feel genuine shame, but then it would happen again and again. When we worked together, I didn't try to eliminate his anger. That's not realistic. Instead, I taught him to find the gap, to notice the moment between trigger and reaction, to insert a pause. At first, it was incredibly difficult. His reactions were so fast, so ingrained, that catching them felt impossible. But with practice, lots of practice, he started to notice. He'd feel the anger rising and catch himself just before the explosion. And in that pause, everything changed. He could choose. He could take a breath. He could say, oh, I need a minute. Instead of unleashing, he could respond like the man he wanted to be instead of reacting like the man he'd been. His marriage survived. Not because his anger disappeared, it didn't, but because he learned to manage it. He found the gap. Here's the mindset shift. You are not your reactions. You are the one who can observe them. You are the one who can choose to interrupt them. You have more control than you've been taught to believe. Some of you might be thinking, but Allan, some reactions are justified. If someone disrespects me, shouldn't I respond? Let me address that directly. I'm not telling you to become passive. I'm not telling you to accept mistreatment without response. What I'm telling you is to choose your response consciously rather than letting your emotions choose for you. There's a massive difference between a deliberate, measured response to disrespect and an explosive, reactive outburst. One comes from power, the other comes from losing control. One earns respect, the other destroys it. You can still set boundaries, you can still address problems. You can still stand up for yourself, but you do it from a place of intention, not impulse. I struggled with this distinction for years. I confused reactivity with strength. I thought if I didn't fire back immediately, I was being weak, letting people walk over me. My turning point came when I watched someone I deeply respected handle a severe provocation. Someone insulted him publicly, aggressively, clearly trying to get a reaction, and he just paused, looked at the person calmly, and after a long moment said quietly, I can see you're upset. Let's talk about this when you're ready to be constructive. That was the most powerful thing I'd ever seen. No explosion, no matching aggression with aggression, just calm, controlled, deliberate response. And the person who'd provoked him looked foolish while he looked like a leader. That's when I understood thinking before reacting isn't weakness, it's the ultimate strength. All right, let's get into the practical application, because understanding this concept is one thing. Actually implementing it when you're triggered is an entirely different challenge. First, extend the gap deliberately. This is the foundation of everything. When something triggers you, your one job is to create space before responding. Any space, even a few seconds, makes a difference. Techniques that work: take 3 deep breaths before saying anything. Physically slow your breathing. This activates your parasympathetic nervous system and gives your rational brain time to engage. Count to 10. I know it sounds like something your grandmother told you. It works. Those 10 seconds can be the difference between a response you're proud of and a reaction you regret. Say, let me think about that. This buys you time without creating confrontation. It signals that you're taking the matter seriously while giving yourself space to respond thoughtfully. Physically move. If possible, change your physical state. Stand up if you're sitting. Step back, take a walk. Physical movement helps interrupt automatic patterns. I've practiced all of these over the years. Different techniques work in different situations. The point isn't which specific method you use, it's that you use something, anything that creates that pause. Second, name the emotion you're feeling. This is powerful neuroscience. When you label an emotion, when you consciously identify, I'm feeling angry or I'm feeling threatened, you actually reduce its intensity. The act of naming activates your prefrontal cortex and dampens your amygdala. So when you feel triggered, don't just react, pause and identify, what am I actually feeling right now? Anger? Fear? Shame? Frustration? This tiny cognitive step changes your relationship to the emotion. You're no longer consumed by it, you're observing it. And that observation gives you power. Third, question your interpretation. Here's something most people don't realize. You're rarely reacting to what actually happened. You're reacting to your interpretation of what happened. Your story about it. Someone doesn't respond to your message and you interpret it as disrespect. Someone gives you feedback and you interpret it as criticism of your worth. Someone looks at you a certain way and you interpret it as judgment. But interpretations aren't facts, they're guesses. And often they're wrong. When you feel triggered, ask yourself, what's my interpretation here? Is it the only possible interpretation? What else might be true? For instance, maybe they didn't respond because they're overwhelmed, not because they're ignoring you. Maybe the feedback was meant to help you grow, not to attack you. Maybe that look meant nothing at all. This doesn't mean you should rationalize away real problems. Sometimes your interpretation is correct, but at least question it before reacting. Give yourself the chance to see alternatives. Fourth, ask the consequence question. Before you react, ask, if I respond this way, what's the likely outcome? Is that the outcome I want? This simple question has saved me from countless mistakes. In the heat of the moment, I felt the urge to fire back, to defend myself, to match aggression with aggression. But when I ask about consequences, I often realize my intended reaction would make things worse, not better. Do I want to be right? Do I want to be effective? Do I want to express my anger? Or do I want to solve the problem? Do I want to win this moment or do I want to win long term? These questions shift your focus from impulse to outcome. And when you focus on outcomes, better choices become obvious. Fifth, create physical triggers for pause. Since reactions happen so fast, you need to build automatic interrupts, physical anchors that remind you to pause. Some people wear a specific bracelet or ring and use it as a trigger. When they notice themselves getting reactive, they touch it and that physical sensation reminds them to pause. Others use their phone lock screen. Every time they pick up their phone to fire off an angry message, they see a reminder to breathe first. I know someone who put a small dot of red nail polish on his thumbnail. Every time he saw it, it reminded him to pause before speaking in meetings. The specific trigger doesn't matter. What matters is creating a physical interrupt that activates when you need it most. Sixth, practice in low-stakes situations. You can't learn this skill when you're maximally triggered. The learning happens in smaller moments, so practice deliberately. When someone cuts you off in traffic, practice the pause. When you get a mildly annoying email, practice choosing your response. When a small inconvenience happens, practice breathing before reacting. These low-stakes situations are your training ground. The skills you build there will be available when the stakes are higher. Seventh, build recovery rituals. Here's the truth, you're going to fail at this sometimes. You're going to react when you should have responded. You're going to lose control despite your best intentions. That's okay. What matters is what you do. Next, build rituals for recovery. When you notice you've reacted poorly, acknowledge it. Apologize if appropriate. Learn what triggered you. Plan for next time. Every failure is data. Every mistake is a lesson. The goal isn't perfection, it's progress. Here's what not to do. Don't use the pause to suppress emotions indefinitely. Don't use it to avoid necessary confrontations. Don't use it as a way to disconnect from your feelings entirely. The pause isn't about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming intentional. Your emotions still matter. They still carry information. You're just learning to process them consciously instead of letting them hijack you. Some people hear this message and become emotional robots. That's not the goal. The goal is emotional intelligence, feeling fully while choosing wisely. Let me be honest with you about something. This skill is incredibly difficult to develop, and there are some important things you need to understand before you commit to this path. First, it takes time, lots of time. Your reactive patterns have been building for years, decades maybe. They're not going to disappear in a week. They're not going to change because you read this once. You're going to fail repeatedly. You're going to catch yourself after the reaction instead of before. You're going to feel frustrated at how automatic your responses are. This is normal. This is part of the process. Don't give up because it's hard at first. Second, some triggers run deep. The reactions, because the most damage are usually connected to old wounds, childhood experiences, past traumas, deep fears about your worth or safety. When someone triggers these deep patterns, the reaction is much harder to interrupt. The emotion is stronger. The automaticity is more powerful. For these deep triggers, you might need more than techniques. You might need therapy. You might need to process underlying wounds that keep getting activated. Don't be ashamed of that. It's just taking the work seriously. Third, some people won't understand your change. When you start responding instead of reacting, some people will be confused. They're used to the reactive you. They might even try to provoke the old patterns because it's familiar. Stay committed anyway. You're not changing for them. You're changing for you. I've had people get frustrated with me for staying calm during conflict. Why won't you fight back? They'd ask, as if matching their energy was some kind of obligation. It's not. You're allowed to break the cycle. You're allowed to respond differently than people expect. Fourth, there's a grief in this process. You might realize how much reactivity has cost you. Relationships damaged, opportunities lost, years spent bouncing from trigger to trigger. Let yourself grieve that. Don't rush past the sadness to get to the skills. The acknowledgement of cost is part of the commitment to change. I remember a moment when this really hit me. I was practicing these skills, getting better at pausing, and suddenly I thought about all the times I hadn't paused, all the damage I'd done, the relationships I'd harmed, the words I couldn't take back. It was painful, really painful. But that pain fueled my commitment. It made the practice feel urgent and important. Here's a story that shows what's possible on the other side. I worked with a woman who was known for her explosive reactions. Smart, talented, successful in many ways, but her temper was legendary. She'd lost 2 jobs because of it. Her marriage was on life support. When we started working together, she was skeptical. This is just who I am, she said. I've always been this way. My father was the same, but she committed to the practice every day. For months, the change wasn't sudden. It was gradual. First, she started catching herself after reactions, noticing what had happened and why. Then she started catching herself during reactions, interrupting them partway through. Finally, she started catching herself before reactions, feeling the trigger and choosing a different response. A year later, she was a different person. Same intensity, same passion, but channeled, controlled, intentional. Her marriage recovered. She got promoted. And one day she told me, I thought learning to pause would make me less myself. Instead, it made me more myself, the real me, not the reactive one. That's what's waiting for you. Not a smaller version of yourself, a more intentional one. A more powerful one. There's something I haven't mentioned yet. Something that goes beyond techniques and practices. Something that matters more than better reactions. When you master the pause, when you truly learn to think before reacting, you don't just change your behavior. You change your identity. Here's what I mean. Most people experience themselves as victims of their emotions. Feelings happen to them. Reactions happen through them. They're passengers in their own lives, watching themselves do things they don't really choose. But when you consistently practice the pause, something shifts at a deep level. You start to experience yourself as the author of your responses, the captain of your ship, the one who chooses. This is a fundamentally different relationship with yourself. Instead of got angry, it becomes I noticed anger arising and chose how to respond to it. Instead of I reacted badly, it becomes I had an impulse and decided what to do with it. You move from being controlled by your inner life to being in relationship with it, from being hijacked by emotions to being informed by them. This changes everything, not just your communication, not just your relationships, your entire experience of being human. I've studied this across cultures, across disciplines, across traditions. Every wisdom tradition points to the same insight. The greatest freedom isn't external, it's internal. It's the freedom to choose your response to whatever happens. Viktor Frankl wrote about finding this freedom in a concentration camp, the most extreme external circumstances imaginable. He discovered that even there, even in unimaginable suffering, there was a space between stimulus and response. A space where choice lived. If it's possible there, it's possible in your life. This is what the ancient Stoics meant by inner freedom, what Buddhists point to in mindfulness, what every mature spiritual tradition teaches in its own language. The power to think before reacting isn't just a useful skill. It's the doorway to a different kind of life. One where you're not controlled by circumstances, not hijacked by emotions, not puppeted by triggers. One where you're finally truly free. So here we are, at the choice that determines everything. You can keep living reactively, keep letting your emotions run the show, keep bouncing from trigger to trigger, cleaning up messes you didn't mean to make, apologizing for reactions you didn't mean to have. You know where that leads: more damage, more regret, more of that feeling that you're not really in control of your own life. Or you can start today, right now. You can commit to finding the gap, to building the pause, to becoming the kind of person who responds intentionally instead of reacting automatically. It won't be easy. I'm not going to lie to you about that. It's one of the hardest things you'll ever do, but it's also one of the most important, because here's what I know after decades of studying human behavior. The quality of your life ultimately comes down to the quality of your responses. Not what happens to you, you can't always control that, but how you respond to what happens to you. That's where your power lies. Every response is a choice. Every choice shapes your character. And your character creates your destiny, the people you admire, the ones with genuine presence, real leadership, deep wisdom. They've all mastered this. They've all learned to think before reacting, to pause before responding, to choose rather than simply be chosen by their impulses. That's what's available to you. That presence, that power, that freedom. So here's my challenge to you tomorrow. Pick one interaction, just one, where you would normally react automatically. And in that moment, pause, create the gap, take 3 breaths. Ask yourself what response you want to choose just once. That's all I'm asking. And notice what happens. Notice how it feels to choose instead of react. Notice the power in that tiny moment of pause. Then do it again, and again, until the pause becomes natural, until the gap becomes familiar, until responding becomes who you are, not just something you sometimes do. Because here's the truth that will transform your life: the moment between what happens to you and what you do next. That's not just a moment, that's everything. That's where you stop being a puppet of circumstances and start being the author of your life. That's where reaction becomes response. That's where frustration becomes wisdom. That's where chaos becomes clarity. That's where you become free. Master that moment and master your life.